Great.
Okay, we're live now.
I got two.
Hi, everyone. This is the Senate Government Operations Committee. We are back on Tuesday, February 13th. And we have shifted gears to S55, which is our bill on the Vermont Open Meeting Law. We have a new draft 3.1, and we have Tucker here to walk us through it. And shall we just have him talk to us about the changes? Is that cool with everyone? Okay. All right, changes only.
Changes only. Okay. For the record, Tucker Anderson, Legislative Counsel. The first new instance of amendment here is a change to the definition of advisory body. So the request here was to clarify that subcommittees are also public bodies that qualify under the definition of advisory body, which kind of cornered me from a drafting perspective, because the term that was used, public bodies, already included subcommittees in its definition. And if I were to add some sort of clarifying clause that says including subcommittees or committees of those committees, then for purposes of the open meeting law, I'd actually be weakening the existing definition of public body where it appears throughout the subchapter. So I copied and pasted the definition of public body and put it in here. So if you're looking at advisory body means any board, council, commission of the state or one of four of its political subdivisions, any board, council, or commission of any agency, authority, or instrumentality of the state, or one or more of its political subdivisions, or any committee of any of the foregoing boards, councils, or commissions. That clause is the subcommittee clause, right? Any committee of those foregoing boards, councils, or commissions that does not have supervision, control, or jurisdiction over legislative, quasi-judicial, tax, or budgetary matters is an advisory body. I can already tell you that I need to work on some of this because the editors may have inadvertently taken out some punctuation here to make sure that that last clause applies to all of the other clauses separated by semicolons. So I will go back to take a look at that.
Thank you. I was confused by that. We also, Senator Watson and I were chatting about the word foregoing. That means any of the boards and committees that were just listed. So Tucker loves this definition. All this might become moot, who knows?
We can certainly find a less legalistic term than foregoing. It would also require a corresponding amendment within the definition of public body, just to make sure that the language is still exactly the same, which is fine.
Okay.
If you would like me to forego the foregoing and find something else, I will do so.
Or we can save it for a future technical correction still.
Of foregoing of. If you can think of something, but no need to worry about that right now, because we'll have to wait and see where everything's going. And then the changing the punctuation. Okay. Let's let this one simmer for a little bit. Okay. Thank you.
The next instance of amendment that is highlighted for you is at the bottom of page 3. When I was reviewing the authority to hold electronic meetings without a physical meeting location, we had a notwithstanding clause in there. It essentially duplicated a lot of the language from the participation in meetings through electronic or other means subdivision in the open meeting law. So what I did is I went into that subdivision, and instead of doing a long notwithstanding clause later, in subdivision 2D, I stated this subdivision D shall not apply to advisory bodies. Stated expressly there. Instead of working in the negative later.
So can you tell us, just walk us through what it does, what doesn't apply then?
What does not apply? Subdivision D of subdivision 2 requires the designated physical meeting location to either have a member of the public body be present or a staff member be physically present at that location. So by stating that this doesn't apply to advisory bodies, it leaves it open to those bodies that have fully remote meetings.
Got it, okay.
In subdivision 3, the highlighted text is at the top of page 4. The term "and special" is added here to clarify that the hybrid meeting requirement applies to regular and special meetings, and this is a conforming amendment with something the committee requested, which was making sure that emergency meetings of public bodies are not required to be held in the hybrid fashion.
Okay.
Subdivision 4, these are the electronic meetings without a physical meeting location.
Question, special meetings. Can you remind us what the difference between a regular and a special meeting is?
Special meeting is an otherwise fully functional meeting of the public body that is falling outside of their regular meeting date time. So the dates and times of regular meetings are established either in statute or rule or in whatever the kind of founding charter document of the particular public body is. So for example, every other Monday. Special meetings fall outside of those regularly scheduled meetings. May have a specific purpose for them.
Okay.
Do, and require 24 hours of notice and public announcement of the special meeting.
What about, so we took a little field trip on Friday, wish you could have been with us, it was super fun, we saw a Vector. Which actually Tim will be more excited about that than you, but we have a committee picture with a Vector. Bob, you're super jealous you were not there. And Allison rode a forklift, I think, or something.
Or a bucket loader.
A bucket loader, yeah.
Oh my lord, I was
Yeah.
gonna say Senator Clarkson forklift certified.
Probably not.
No.
She didn't actually
She's a
drive,
lot
it,
of
but
things,
she
but
climbed it.
not for.
But this is a diversion from what I was gonna ask you. So we were speaking to one of the members of the Barry City Council, and we were talking about this bill. He asked about what I think he said was a special meeting, but I think he meant it more in the sort of generic sense of special, not the technical sense of special. Where like they held a meeting at a senior citizens breakfast or something like that, and the whole city council went and had their meeting there, or at a, I can't remember exactly what the example was he gave, but some special place. So it was their regular meeting, but it was at a special place. And he said, you know, we do this to be able to get out in the community and sort of have the community see the city council. But if we do that, we might not be able to be at a place where we could hold a hybrid meeting. Is there a way we could have an exception to that kind of thing? I see you, Senator Akikowski, because I know you have concerns about this. So, yeah. So I think that's special in a different way, but I don't know if there's a provision that we could create that would potentially permit that kind of thing.
So it actually is special in this way as well. So that would be a special meeting. They just have to warn the place of that meeting at least 24 hours before the meeting is held. And of course, the open meeting law as a whole, regardless of what type of meeting is being held, you have to hold it at a place that meets the Title IX public accommodation standards. So there is some precedent here for public bodies being able to meet in other locations so long as they comply with the requirements of the open meeting law. And it's a policy choice for you all to make as to whether you want to grant an exception to the hybrid meeting requirement for purposes of off-campus
Right.
special meetings.
So even if they held it, if they meet every other Monday and they were meeting on their regular time, but it's in a different location, that is considered a special meeting.
Right, because they're holding it at that different location for some other purpose besides their regular meeting, is the assumption.
So one sort of, if we were to create an exception, and I don't know what the committee as a whole thinks, but one way to do it is just to say that not only emergency meetings are exempt from the hybrid requirement, but special meetings are too. Is that one way to do
And
it?
you could narrow it however you would like, so
Yeah.
special meetings that are held in a location other than the public body's regular designated physical meeting location.
Okay. Senator Biegelski.
So I have a couple of questions, and one of them is, how do we get around? Like, we went on a field trip and that wasn't Zoomed, it wasn't, so how do we navigate going to a different place, holding a meeting in a different place that is running afoul of?
That's a really good point.
So I don't want to step on Secretary Bloomer's toes, so I would say that you should consult with the secretary on any questions about the application of parliamentary law to the committees of the Senate. But by and large, it is important to note that the open meeting law does not bind the General Assembly or its committees. House rules bind the House committees, Senate rules bind the Senate committees, and then whatever the parliamentary body a chair belongs to for a joint committee, those rules will bind a joint committee.
Right, so it's the Senate rules, and
Got it.
the Senate rules allow us to go on field trips.
Got it.
Also, there is a constitutional provision that requires the doors of the State House to be open to the public
We close them as out.
when the legislature is in session.
As you know, I have concerns with how that might be. How granting, like, sure, you can have special meetings without this, could be abused, but I'm wondering if that is the direction the committee feels that they want to move in. If there could be a combination of a special meeting in which it is infeasible to host a hybrid meeting. So it wouldn't just be any special meeting, it would be a special meeting in which you really couldn't.
Well, you could certainly put this in the local incident
Because you
language, which
That's why
already
you
uses,
said that.
already uses the term infeasible. So you could always build some sort of basis in there for the chair to publicly announce that it is infeasible to use the internet at the
Yeah.
location.
But then would the public body have to warn the meeting and where it's going to be? The public would have to be able to attend the meeting at that location. And okay, so if that's the direction that people feel like they want to move, like, I could probably cautiously maybe be okay with.
As long as it's infeasible.
Yes.
I see. Okay, Senator Watson.
Thank you. I have two thoughts. One is, because what I had understood us to have like discussed, and what seems to be the understanding is that, like, for the special meetings, it's okay if they're not hybrid. Maybe I'm not picking that up correctly.
We haven't made a decision on it yet. We're still mulling.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to know that because this language as it exists right now is that even the special meetings must be hybrid, which if.
Well, what we said was that the emergency meetings don't have to be hybrid. And then there was the question of what about
Well,
special meetings?
Sorry, but if by emergency meetings, you mean the local incident meetings?
No, emergency meetings, like there's an emergency, we have to hold an emergency meeting that we have 10 minutes to decide what to do with this burning building or something like
I
that.
think that's a special, is that not a special? That's not a special meeting.
Correct.
Under
Oh,
one VSA 312 subsection C, you have regular meetings in subdivision 1, special meetings in subdivision 2.
Okay.
Subdivision 3 provides that emergency meetings may be
Okay.
held without public announcement, without posting of
Okay.
notices, and without 24-hour notice to the members of the public body, provided some public notice is given as soon as possible before any such meeting. They may only be held when necessary to respond to an unforeseen occurrence or condition requiring immediate attention by the public body.
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I had conflated those.
Yeah, there are 3 types of meetings, so
Gotcha.
yeah,
Okay.
we were
And-
saying emergency meetings.
Right.
Don't worry about the whole, yeah.
And then so my other thought is just as an example, I remember as mayor. I can't remember. I think I was mayor during this time, but somebody wanted us to take over the maintenance of a road. And so we did a site visit of the road, and that would be a kind of example that I have in my head about
A special meeting.
well, yeah, right, like an off campus.
Where it would be infeasible.
Where it'd be infeasible, right? Like we're walking up and down the road. I mean, media came actually, but that was.
Right, it's kind of like our field trip
Yeah,
on Friday,
exactly.
the media was
Just-
there. We all went, but it would have been impossible to Zoom it.
Right.
Or it would have been really feasible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where I say, like, I can cautiously get on board with some language around, like, if it isn't feasible, but what I don't wanna see is like, every week, we're gonna hold a meeting at a place that isn't our regular meeting space, because then I don't have to stream it, or, oh, we're discussing something really controversial, so we'll hold it in a place where, like, I don't wanna see that start to happen.
Okay, do you get the gist of what we're talking about? Like special meetings that are infeasible can be not.
Yes, and I can cobble something accordingly for you to review and give feedback.
Thank you, Tucker.
Okay.
We count on you for cobbling.
Yes,
You are a good
mulling.
cobbler.
I do yeoman's work with my cows. Okay. Subdivision 4. This subdivision governs electronic meetings without physical meeting location. You are familiar with the first instance, which is when a quorum or more of the members of an advisory body want to meet fully remotely, they are able to.
Mhm.
Okay. At the end, so on line 8, page 4, a quorum or more of the members of any public body may attend an emergency meeting of the body by electronic or other means without being physically present at or staffing a designated meeting location.
Okay,
Right, so that's the,
that's the emergency meeting thing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay,
And in subdivision 5, there's a conforming amendment here to make sure that emergency meetings are covered by this subdivision as well. And this required the public body of any body that is going to meet fully electronically to post information that enables the public to access the electronic platform. And this adds that that information has to be included in the public notice for the meeting. And the reason for that requirement is that emergency meetings do not have a published agenda. They just have some form of public notice that the meeting is gonna happen.
Okay.
Page 5. In section 3, in the amendments to the state of emergency powers, within the definition of directly impedes, I still have it bracketed. It was my understanding that you wanted to use the Goldilocks of the 3 terms that I offered.
yes.
Infeasible, if you are ready to lock that in, I'll get rid of the brackets and the highlighting.
well, I wouldn't say lock it in, but we're ready
Okay.
to say that is where we are at.
But I love that idea.
The Goldilocks.
Only lock it in
Goldilocks it in. You got
temporarily,
it.
pending review.
Pending, us changing our mind.
Okay.
Bottom of page 6.
Bottom of page 6, in subsection C, we're still working in the same section related to the local incidents. One of the notes that I had from the committee is that the designated officer that I used was perhaps too high of an officer within the political subdivisions of the state. So I had defined a governmental unit. And, for example, that would be for the agency of administration, the secretary of administration would be making for decisions for all of the committees, subcommittees, boards, what have you within the agency. And the same for the municipal and the district level. If you want me to go back to the old language, I certainly can. This amendment makes it the highest ranking elected or appointed officer for the public body. And the reason I did that is that the discussion that carried on after some of your comments about this, every member of the committee talked about the select board chair or the chair of a given board. So my assumption in taking my notes is that that was your aim, was to have it be the highest ranking elected or appointed officer of the body, making this.
Yeah, I think yes, but I think that, you guys correct me if I misunderstood, but we also would want the town manager, for example, in the town to be able to do it, or the superintendent for a school board, or the commissioner, I guess, or maybe not, because the commissioner might not have anything to do with that body. It's complicated when we're trying to figure out like for state and local at the same time, because the structure is so different, but, yeah, Senator Watson.
That's okay. I am just anticipating like bizarre situation in which let's say the select board chair and town manager, they have both, let's say, and they don't agree,
Mhm.
and then who's making the call? So like, I'm wondering, in the absence.
So maybe it should stay with the board, then the board itself, they have to govern themselves, so
Yeah.
maybe it's the highest ranking member of, or elected or appointed member of the board.
Just to make it clear who is,
I think if a town is a town manager, it should be with the town manager. I don't.
Do you know which section we're talking about?
Yeah, you're talking about who gets to make the call in the local incident emergency. I'm hip to this.
Well, you just walked in, so
I
I want to
know,
make sure.
It was
Yeah, but-
impressive. It was very impressive.
Well, I mean, yes, what if they do disagree, who breaks the tie?
And you're anticipating problems that I would not see. I think if there's local incident, everybody's pretty clear on it.
well, it's, so sorry to be opining, when we're editing, but, I can also picture that the town manager is less of a political person, and so
Right.
one possibility is that it should be them by
Instead of the
instead of the highest public elected officer, but,
Yes, you're right, the town manager is almost never
Yeah.
a political person.
Right.
They're appointed or hired by the select board.
so that's one but I don't know. There's so many instances where like, okay, so what if you don't have the town manager as clerk? Then right in the absence of the town manager, is it then the highest elected officer? Anyway, there's a lot of.
Well, let's keep this for now, and we're gonna get more testimony, and we can see if people have opinions on this.
Yeah, that's true, people.
And, I mean, I think people have opinions, let's just say, so. Senator Bielski.
Tucker, who is ultimately responsible if open meeting law is broken? Is it the town manager? Is it the select board? Is it who?
It is the public body.
So then I think they should be
In
responsible.
my recollection of the enforcement provisions, it's the members of the public body.
So then I think it should be the members of the public body that make the decision. If they're ultimately gonna be the ones held responsible if the decision has been made incorrectly, then I think they should be the ones making the decision. And as much as I've said, it gives me indigestion to have it be the chair of the select board, if that's the group that's ultimately gonna be held responsible if it's done wrong, then I think it should be the highest elected member of the public
It's
body.
easiest to define.
Yeah.
Right, and also, I mean, hopefully in towns, people have good relationships and they're consulting with each other.
Yeah.
And we're chair called the superintendent or the town manager, and I was like, hey, this snowstorm's pretty
Yeah.
bad, do you think we should just meet remotely? Or whatever, I don't know.
So to confirm, under one VSA 314 subsection A, the penalties are against a person who is a member of the public body. And then there's varying penalties within that.
Yeah.
And later on, the application of attorney's fees is the public body
Okay,
as well.
so, yeah, I think I agree with Anne for the sake of not creating instances where two people disagree or putting it in the hands of someone who ultimately won't be held responsible for that decision. That it makes sense to stay as it is. In spite of the fact that I don't love it.
All right, well, that's good, but I mean, not that you don't love it, but I mean, that we've seen as
We've watched
everyone else, down at the other end of the table, you guys good with that?
Yep.
Okay,
Not sure what about anything about this bill,
well, we'll see. Page 8.
Yes, so section 4 actually accidentally left this all highlighted.
Oh, I wondered if you would change it. I read it. I was like, I think
No.
this is the same.
It's exactly the same, except I added a that somewhere in here
Oh,
for purposes,
to make
so
it clear.
line 8, accordingly, the facilitation of hybrid meetings that run based on best practices. Before that was accordingly, the facilitation of hybrid meetings run based on best
Okay.
practices. And it actually should be that are. I promise I'll be running it 100% soon.
You're always running with that.
All right. right, section 5 is new, and this was the request from Senator Vygotsky to see some language about posting penalty and enforcement procedures on municipal websites. So this amends the penalty and enforcement provisions of the open meeting law to add a new subsection E to state that a municipality shall post on its website if it maintains one, an explanation of the procedures for submitting notice of an open meeting law violation to the public body or the attorney general, and a copy of the text of this section. So it would require, here's the step-by-step procedures for submitting notice of a violation to the public body or the AG. And then the text of 1 VSA 314.
Okay. Why the text of this section, just to
Because it
prove that you need to do it?
without having to go through and enumerate what they have to inform someone of about how the law operates, it would allow them to see, for example, that either the person or the attorney general can bring the action. That there are penalty provisions associated with it, what remedies the public body can use to avoid the complaint being taken to Superior Court, and finally, the availability of attorney's fees.
Okay, Senator Watson?
Sorry, so 2, copy of the text of this section, this is literally just,
1 VSA 314. And
I think, sorry.
similar kind of consumer protection notice provisions are built into things like sports betting, right? There has to be a link on the sports betting page to all of the applicable consumer protection provisions that you put into 31 VSA chapter 25.
Did you draft
This
that
is-
bill?
I did.
Tucker and I spent years working on sports betting together, and did you hear Wendy Knight's thing on BPR? This
But we're not going back.
turning us more money than we thought in the first few weeks.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, Super Bowl, exactly right.
Okay, next one, the informational meeting.
Yes, so this was actually something you saw last time. I'm sorry that I didn't take the highlight off of it, informational. One of the requests was, there were 2 here, actually. The first was to make it expressed at any type of informational meeting that's held, whether for an in-person floor vote, otherwise known as a viva voce vote, or an Australian ballot vote, be held in hybrid fashion. So you had already done that in 17 VSA section 2640. The new provisions are in section 7. And the first thing that I wanted to flag is that I haven't added anything to subdivision 1 here, because as I noted at least 2 or 3 walkthroughs ago, this is likely already covered by the hybrid meeting requirements that you've built into the open meeting law. And the reason is that the public information hearings that are held around Australian ballot votes are run by the legislative body. So the highlighted language here, the legislative body shall hold a public informational hearing on the question, right? So that is a public body holding a meeting. It should
It should
already
be.
be subject to the open meeting law, which is why it wasn't included initially. However, if you want to belt and suspender it, right at the end of that subdivision, can add a sentence stating that the meeting shall be held under the hybrid meeting requirements of 1 VSA 312, whatever.
Wait, in addition to what you've already put there in section 6.
Section 6, so this is, the distinction is about the informational meetings that are held in 3 days preceding an annual meeting and are specific to relate mostly to the floor meetings of municipalities, right? And those are run by the moderator. And are also referenced in this section about the informational hearings.
Okay, so just as an example that you and I both know well, Starsboro, your town. They held a Saturday morning meeting. Which section does that relate to? Their Saturday morning meeting is run by a moderator.
I assume it's
It's under 17 VSA 2640, which is the section 6 language.
Okay, it's an informational meeting
right.
and that would have to be,
Held in 3 days preceding the end.
okay, but then this one on top of page 10 is not an informational meeting?
It is an informational meeting related to questions and issues that are to be voted by Australian ballot.
Oh, okay, it's just I see, that's the difference, okay.
It may just be a question and answer on bond.
This is-
Whatever. Thank you.
Picking it up.
Took me
So
3
there's two
times.
different
It could be.
types of informational meetings because of how the ultimate vote will happen.
Right.
Okay.
But it could all be.
It's excluded from here, but there's even a reference to section 2640 within the Australian ballot provisions that says that if a town has voted to hold their informational hearings in the 3 days preceding the annual meeting pursuant to 17 VSA section 2640, that section is what is going to govern how the information is held.
So another question here is in section 1 and then 2A, 1. In section 1, it says posting the warnings at least 10 days in advance. Oh,
Of the
Of
hearing.
the warning is it within 10 days, but the hearing could be held within 30 days preceding.
So that timeline in
Yeah,
subdivision 1 is 10 days in advance of the hearing
Mhm.
so it's just a normal warning.
for the informational hearing itself,
Right.
not for the actual vote.
Mhm.
And subdivision 2A, this is what I was attempting to find you about earlier. You had asked to see an example of an extended timeline where the informational meeting could be held. So under this current language, the hearing shall be held within 10 days preceding, so it has to fall within the 10 days preceding the annual meeting. And Senator Watson had asked for some language. Can it fall in a longer window of time?
Right, and that was to be able to capture when ballots are mailed, if there's a. So, for mailing ballots, so towns could do it earlier to kind of get those, okay. There anything else?
Yeah, aren't mail-in ballots mailed 45 days ahead of the election day, so wouldn't it make sense to align it with the day ballots are mailed?
Or before that, but so that they could vote before they mail their ballot.
Well, ballots are mailed out, they're put in the mail to the constituent, I believe, 45 days before the election, yeah.
Oh, okay. So
So not for local elections necessarily, because they're not automatic.
Yeah. Like I had to request.
Yeah, you don't get for
But
town
they
meeting, you have to.
can
request.
come to you 45 days ahead of the election. That is the earliest point in time in which we allow that.
I still think 30 days is ample if it's mailed out. They can hold on to their ballot for a few days.
I don't want to comment without researching the different timelines between general elections and
Right.
annual.
And
Yeah, I think that there's a shorter time period for the local elections.
no, it's the same amount of time you can vote.
It also depends on if there's a charter question on the ballot, because the timelines for the
Okay,
charter discussions are.
well, let's leave it at 30 days for now, that does give them a much broader. And you can look into that for us. Okay,
Thank you.
Working group.
So this section previously was a requirement for the Secretary of State to submit a report on accessibility to the annual meeting. So this was the remote access to annual meeting report from the Secretary of State. But the testimony from the Office of the Secretary of State was that they did not want to be a part of this, that it should be some of the nonprofit actors in the space. And the problem with just swapping out those NGOs or a state or municipal entity is that they are not part of the state or its political subdivisions, so they can't necessarily be directed to provide you with that sort of research services. So the construct here is a working group that consists of the entities that you discussed the last time you met. That will submit essentially the same report. So working through this, it creates the working group on accessibility of annual meetings. The membership, if you're with me on page 10 in subsection B, is one designee from the LCT, one designee from the Municipal Clerks Treasurers Association, and one designee of the VSBA. The flag up front for the open meeting law purposes is that this is a 3-member working group, so they will not be able to have any sort of deliberations about the report that will be meeting. But those were the 3 that I had written down, so if you want to tinker with the membership or add or subtract.
Sorry, what did you just say?
Decisions.
They can't have a
deliberate.
separate meeting, like they can't have a, they'd always have a quorum.
They can't get together to, for example, deliberate on the contents of the report that they're submitting without holding an open meeting. Because anytime there's 2 members of this working group together discussing the report, they are.
Can't they call? Just. They can have a phone call.
That would be serial communication subverting the purposes of the open meeting law and would technically be a violation. Because they would be gathering in a forum or more, conducting the business of the public body. It's a common issue for 3-member boards.
Yeah, that's a problem. So should we make it bigger than that?
Let's hold off
Do
on
we need, actually,
Senator Bihowski.
So I have a note in my previous version of this bill, and we've talked about it a couple of times, to include the Disability Rights Council.
That, at least to my knowledge, is a separate section of the bill that relates to the best practices and recommendations from the Secretary of State. Am I incorrect?
So in my draft 2.1, we've included the Department of Aging and Independent Living. And I have a note next to it that may not be the right group, because if they're gonna be doing work around accessibility, it makes sense that the people in which we're trying to make the meeting accessible to are at the table.
Right, but I think Tucker is right that, you're both right, that what we had given Tucker drafting instructions on was about the best practices thing and including the disability rights. Where is that?
So in
It's
the
in
previous
there.
draft, section 7. Okay, I do see that, you're right.
This is section 8.
And I guess I thought they were gonna be kind of the same report. I didn't realize there were gonna be 2 reports, because I would
Yeah.
feel pretty strongly that the disability community should be out of working group about access.
This, the Secretary of State did not want to do this report, so that's why this got changed, and so we could add more people to it, but it's,
Okay.
the next section is where we added the Vermont Developmental Disabilities Council in section 9.
Okay. I guess I just wanna flag that with splitting it into 2 pieces, I wanna still make sure that
Sure.
the disability community is at the table for local meeting access, accessibility of annual
You
meetings.
got that?
I've got it.
Okay.
So the duties of the working group, they're gonna study accessibility to annual meetings, including the current level of accessibility to physical locations and polling places, whether current annual meeting locations and procedures comply with state and federal law governing accessibility, and the feasibility of using electronic platforms to support remote attendance and voting at annual meetings. Those were the 3. I know that this was in its last form, a broader study about remote participation. So if there's any changes, I just pulled these from your discussions around this
Yeah.
issue over the last couple of weeks.
Okay.
Nice. The whole point of some of this is to increase participation, which in town meeting, and it's, you know, I think it's a big issue, whether it's remote or not. I mean, just attendance period is down.
Well, and that also begs the question of Australian ballots and, you know, if you have voice vote, you have to be there to vote, and that's hard for people to be there.
Well, sometimes you just have to show up. I mean, information meetings also are actually very important, and there are all sorts of things discussed. We change, you know, that stuff happens.
Right, but information meetings, we just make, you know, in this draft would be hybrid. And what the problem with
That we are facing here is they're not.
right, because of the voting, there's actual voting that happens and you can't do remote voting at this.
Yet, yeah, or that's what this is about, is to explore how we might.
Or how we could address. Yeah.
Well, we do it, I mean, what's interesting is all of us have been in meetings where we vote.
But this is a different type of vote. This is not a vote of, a committee. This is a vote of the public. And remember last session where we got into a very heated discussion about electronic ballot returns? That's, this is the same kind of thing. This is like
I agree.
public voting on public questions. So it's more complicated than just a committee voting, the select board voting or this committee voting. Anyway, or what?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, it's just, I have to say, very interesting. This is a full circle moment for me because when I first got on the select board, Hartford had decided to move away from a vote of the town in a town meeting fashion to an Australian vote on our ballot. And we are one of the fun towns. I think we are one of a few that have like an informational meeting that you're talking about in our charter. And then we also have which is our Saturday, and we vote on the town officer's salary, for example, and there's like 2 bonds. I think we do some other random things. And then we have an Australian ballot on everything else.
Mhm.
So we kind of do what we have taken from a little bit of each. So I just had 2 thoughts, which is one, we had discussed, and I don't know if it's possible as a town at one point, to say that if that a percentage of the town had to be representative at the town meeting for it to count, to have basically we wanted to see if we could have a quorum of the town to save our town meeting day. Because the debate
Right.
was, there's literally 1% of the community is actually here. So we would get at least 10% if we had it by Australian ballot. So I don't know if there's a way. I would love to understand what percentage of individual towns that still have voice vote are actually voting, of the registered voters. That's an interesting question. And I don't know if there was a way that we could. Because I think the larger question is, should people be switching to Australian ballot if they're not getting participation in those meetings? And is this just a Band-Aid solution to getting more participation at those meetings for some towns? So that's one thought. And then the other thought that I had was, can we make it so that you have to have it be hybrid for recording and publication, but not voting? I attended virtually the informational meeting that we had, but I did not vote from Zoom.
Mhm.
I just watched it, and then I texted people and asked them what was going on because I wasn't there,
Mhm.
So that was helpful for me because I was not able to attend that informational meeting.
Mhm.
But I would like to have that be required, that you at least have to have, I don't know, you can, if you want to show up, almost if there's you could. It's almost, do you get what I'm saying? I'm trying to figure out, is there a way that you could have it be that it is live, that people can see it and watch it as it's happening,
Mhm.
but you don't necessarily have the ability to vote at that meeting
Yep.
or
Well-
from that Zoom.
I guess a couple things would be, we did, in this bill, we do make the informational meetings require them.
Yeah, those are hybrid.
Hybrid,
So,
right?
okay.
So the town meetings itself, there was this question of, are those a meeting of a public body? No, they're not. They're the meeting of the town itself, so they're not subject to the same
Mhm,
open
yeah.
meeting provisions. And so this report is sort of trying to get at those questions, making recommendations about what are options. So
Yeah,
that's
so
an
could we
option.
include in it, a conversation about percentages and are people actually attending town meeting in the way that we want them to be?
Well,
As
that's
a percentage of, I don't know if that's a part of it, because I think,
participation is, I think.
Yeah,
key
I think
piece
it's
to
a
be
part-
explored.
So do you wanna add on page 11, provision where they discuss that right now?
Yeah,
they're-
I
we're
like the
asking
level of
to
accessibility,
Study accessibility.
But that's,
Um,
and participation, you could throw it there.
and town participation, I think it's a huge issue. Is how can
percentage of town.
how can we make
voter
Participation.
Yeah.
Tucker, are you town moderator?
No.
You should be.
Don't give them other.
Make a move.
In my
Yeah,
current
when
role
you
and
get there.
capacity, I refrain from getting
I don't
involved.
listen to them.
I know.
I go to their meetings, but.
Ellen Kaler, Ellen can be our agent.
Yes. But then my other question is more involved with Hartford's informational meeting, is it a meeting of is it a meeting of the town or is it an informational meeting?
Who calls the meeting?
The town moderator.
Okay, you guys, I'm gonna stop us for just a second because we wanna finish walking through the draft and then we have witnesses waiting who are supposed to have testified.
Oh,
Well,
well,
it'll
there-
change how I feel about the staff.
Yes, we're not making any decisions that are stuck in, what's the word you?
They are not Goldilocks.
They're not Goldilocks right now, so we can always get back to these. I don't wanna keep our
It's
people
Goldilocks.
waiting too much longer. Do you have something quick or can it wait until we go through the bill again? Okay, do you wanna just go through the rest of the changes quickly and then I
Yes,
wanna be,
very quickly, policy choices that you still need to make within the section. I kept the Secretary of State in for purposes of providing the legal and technical assistance to this particular working group. It
Yeah.
can be any agency, would not recommend using legislative counsel. Okay, and I did add in section 9, this is on page 12, the best practices section. You had asked for the Vermont Developmental Disabilities Council to be added. Is that the correct state council?
I'm not sure,
no, Dale is probably the correct state council. but
no,
there
they're
is
not a
department.
council, Dale is a
It's a
department.
department.
Yes.
So we'll ask,
It's
I think
VCIL,
it should be
Vermont
limited to
Council.
developmental disabilities.
It's VCIL.
Or
Vermont Council
Disability
of
Rights
Independent
Vermont.
we will figure that out.
Okay. The final two changes. First, in section 10, it adjusts the appropriation section to accommodate a $2,000 appropriation for the per diems and reimbursement for members of the working group on access to annual meetings. That figure is made up of the generic calculation sheet that JFO uses, and it goes by the number of meetings and the number of members. In this case, it's budgeted for 3 members or 4 meetings.
Okay. Great. Perfect.
In
This,
Sorry,
Go ahead.
can I just ask 4 meetings? How do we know they can get their work done in 4 meetings?
Tucker just made up a number.
Yes,
But the
placeholder.
problem is that we're stuck with those numbers when we run these meetings.
We can change it. It's not
Yes.
a lot.
Everything in that section is a placeholder where I was just trying to capture the discussions from the last couple of weeks and avoid directing non-state actors to
Do
do
free
some
work.
legislative research for us.
Yes, you did a great job, Tucker. We appreciate it.
Thank you. The last 2 changes are the timelines. Effective date changed back to July 1st, 2024.
Right?
So this is immediately effective upon the expiration of Act 1. And the delay for enforcement on municipalities is still January 1st, 2026. So there will be a year and a half for the grant program to roll out, for the technology to be introduced, and for municipalities to come into compliance.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Do you need to leave or
I don't, would you like me to say?
just in case? In case we get into hot water in over our head,
I'll be right there.
we get Goldilocks.
No one really answers. Will somebody explain to me this term Goldilocks?
So, Tucker said he had 3 choices in the last draft, and we chose the middle choice. Not too hot, not too cold, not too big. not
So
too
it's
soft.
now Goldilocks. I got
It's
it.
gold, so he said we chose the Goldilocks option. And then somebody said something about something being locked, and I said, it's not locked in, and Tucker made it the pun of it's not Goldilocks.
Got it, got it.
We
Now
may
I-
use this, but this is, as Senator Watson has recommended to me, this will be our cabaret skit, so.
Goldilocks,
Goldilocks.
okay, we will.
I don't know.
All right, so we are going to move on, and I appreciate the witnesses being
Yeah.
patient and hopefully amused, maybe not, about our strange conversation here. Scott Gillette, from the wonderful town of Hancock. Hi, Scott.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you for your patience. We're gonna introduce ourselves to you and the other 2 witnesses, because none of you have been in our committee, I don't think. And then I'll sort of set the stage about why we asked you to be here or why you're here, and then you can tell us what you think. Hopefully you've read or at least had a chance to look over the bill, and you just heard the walkthrough that our attorney did. But you know me, I'm Senator Ruth Hardy, from the Addison District.
Olivia Parker, Committee Assistant.
Senator Tanya Lehowski, Chittenden Central.
Senator Rebecca White, Windsor County District.
Senator Bob Norris, Franklin County to include Alberg in the county of Granite.
Senator Ann Watson from the Washington District.
Allison Clarkson, Windsor County District. Close to Hancock, but not quite.
So, what, Scott, one of the reasons, well, in addition to just wanting to hear from lots of different select boards, but you are, Hancock is a small town, and what I've heard from members of your community is that you run pretty effective hybrid meetings for your select board meetings, and so wanted to hear from you about how you do that, and then just general thoughts on the bill. We've heard from a lot of towns, some positive, some negative, so just wanting to hear your opinion. So if you can just introduce yourself for the record and then tell us your thoughts, that'd be great.
Okay. I am Scott Gillette. I am the chair of the select board for the town of Hancock, Vermont. We started running electronic only meetings during COVID. The three members of the select board at that time were all fairly technically savvy and could handle the technical requirements of participating in Zoom meetings, and at the same time keeping within parliamentary procedure and whatever we had in place during that emergency time as far as open meeting law was concerned. Once the emergency was lifted, we decided, because we got advice from VLCT that we were within the law, that we could participate in the meetings both with members of the select board present physically and electronically. And of course, because we were running them through Zoom, we would post the Zoom meeting links in the warning to the meeting so that the members of the public could also participate that way. I think it's gone fairly well. It's not without its technical difficulties. We've had some personnel changes on the select board, and some members of the board are not as technically savvy as others, which gives us some headaches. For example, if the two technically savvy members of the board are out of town and participating electronically, the less savvy person has to set up and administer the equipment at the town office, and that is not without its challenges.
So you're just a 3-person select board member team?
We are a 3-person board, yes.
Okay.
Are there questions you would like to know about how we operate our meetings?
Well, so members of the public, do they come in person and also via Zoom?
Primarily members of the public show up in person. We have had situations, the strongest example I can think of was when we were debating approving retail cannabis in the town. The person who had asked the select board to consider that was not a resident of the town, but had bought property in town and was planning on opening a retail cannabis business. So that person and his associates participated remotely in the meetings where we discussed that. We did hold our informational meeting for that Australian ballot in a hybrid fashion. Though we had, I believe we only had physical people attend physically in that meeting.
Okay, and what level of equipment do you have to do the hybrid? Has that been an issue?
It has been an issue. When we decided to do it, it was sort of an experiment, and we set it up in a very ad hoc fashion. Essentially, we voted to spend a budget of $400. We bought a Google Chromebook and a webcam, and that is how we run the meetings. It's not the most effective way of doing it. I see that you've got a very nice video conferencing system on your table there.
Your
something-
your tax dollars at work.
Honestly, I've been thinking about spending my stipend on the select board on one of those because it would make running our meetings much easier.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
great.
Well, the bill does include a grant program for towns to be able to buy equipment and get training on running hybrid meetings.
I saw that and I was very happy to see that included.
Oh, good. Good.
Um,
So the way that the bill is structured is that the legislative boards, like the select board and school boards and stuff, would have to do hybrid, but all the other advisory levels could do either in person or remote. So and then there are exceptions for emergency meetings, and maybe you heard us talking about special meetings and what we do with special meetings, like if your board had wanted to do a field trip to go see where they wanted to put the cannabis operation or something like that, you could have, we're contemplating allowing that to happen as well, without a hybrid option. Does Hancock do you think has concerns the way the bill is structured or any suggestions for it at this point?
I do actually. The one thing that's made hybrid operation for us possible is EC Fiber, the CUD.
Yay!
It's been a godsend for the town. EC Fiber provides at no charge a hotspot for our municipal government in the town office. And that's what makes running the hybrid meetings possible, is that our town is fully connected to the EC Fiber network. And so my big concern was with towns that do not have operational CUDs yet or functioning networks, how are they going to be able to comply with this? For Hancock, it was extremely easy because we have gigabit internet everywhere in town.
Yeah.
But even, I've heard in your discussion talking about making the annual town meeting hybrid, and that gave me tremendous pause. I am an audiovisual technician by trade, and
They're lucky.
and the thought of trying to support a hybrid meeting in that large public forum rate would be just catastrophically expensive for a small town like Hancock. Not just talking about a public address system that could be connected to the hybrid meeting without causing feedback or noise cancellation, but when you get a public address system, you then run into the Americans with Disabilities Act, and you have to provide all of the inductive loop hearing aid compatibility. You're talking tens of thousands of dollars to be able to support that, even in a tiny town like Hancock, and it would only get used once a year.
So that's a great point. Would towns run into those same issues for just the regular meetings? What you just mentioned about compliance with the ADA?
Technically, we should have to comply with the ADA for that meeting. Though the ADA does offer some very limited exemptions based around feasibility. If you're talking about a historic building with second floor, like the second floor is technically a place of public accommodation, but if it's a landmark structure and putting in an elevator to get to that second floor is infeasible. There are certain exceptions to the ADA, but they are very, very limited.
Right.
I think in a tiny town meeting where we're all sitting around a table and there are 8 people attending, we certainly make sure that everyone can hear and participate in the meeting. But if we're talking about a meeting of the entire town in a hall, that becomes I think that we're approaching a threshold there.
Right.
That's that.
Yeah. Senator Clarkson, do you have a question?
Yeah, Scott, how many do you normally get at your annual meeting, at your town meeting?
It varies. Typically, I would say between 25 and 30 people. And just to give you to make it clear, the population of Hancock is 330 or thereabouts right now.
Right. No, I'm pretty clear. That's pretty small. And during COVID, did you find a big increase in participation when you were fully remote? Because one of the things we're trying to do is build on best practices from COVID and best, the opportunities COVID presented in terms of, there were people who couldn't. Anyway, was there increased participation during COVID?
There was not. As I recall, most of the meetings during COVID were just the three members of the board. We would occasionally have one person join per meeting if they wanted to make a public comment or address the board about a specific topic. But it really did not increase participation in the meetings. In fact, it probably hurt it because a lot of the people who participate now are older residents of the town who show up physically to the meetings because they live in the village.
Right.
We
Yeah,
really
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
we really only have people participate electronically if there's a specific issue that they want to discuss and they are unable to be there physically.
Mhm.
So I just want to follow up on the ADA. So the ADA is a requirement now. How do you accommodate, are your town offices fully accessible?
Our town office is accessible.
Okay.
We meet on the first floor and all of the doors are accessible.
Right.
And, one of the things that we're trying to do with the hybrid requirement is to allow people for whom a meeting in person is more feasible and more comfortable, they would be able to meet in person. And for people who maybe can't do that because maybe they can't drive there, they don't have a car, or they have a health condition that makes it hard for them to be there in person, they can still do that. So that accessibility is one of the driving factors of what we're trying to accomplish, but we also want to make sure that we're not making things that are infeasible for most towns or all towns. I think your point about the internet access is really a good one. Are there other things that you can think of from your perspective that we should consider?
Let me look at my notes just a second. I think in talking to people about giving this testimony today, the concern is that by making these requirements, it's putting a pretty big workload on typically the chairs of these boards who are going to be the ones administering all of this. My life partner is the chair of our school board, and a lot of this work falls on her on the school board side, and they're finding it quite difficult to actually attract people to serve on the board at all at this point.
Well, that was true before.
That was true before, but we're running into a thing where the people who are technically savvy are younger, they're working people, they don't have the time to participate in the meeting. The people who do have the time to participate are older and retired, but they don't have the technical skills.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't have the curiosity to learn them in a lot of cases.
Mm-hmm. So, do you have any suggestions for how we might overcome that, or is it just?
Not that I think would be politically very attractive
That's okay.
to the Senate.
We're trying to just crack this nut and make the meetings accessible without making them infeasible for the people who are running them. Many of us around this table, in fact, maybe all of us, have served at the local level as well.
Yeah.
And so we realize how hard it is, and how much work. And to have, 2 people in your household doing that work and chairing boards is pretty incredible. So we don't want to overburden people. And we also want the public to be able to attend the meetings in a way that's feasible. So that's the sort of balance we're trying to make.
Understood. I was really happy to see the grants for training and assistance. I think the biggest thing for us at the municipal level is when we need to attract new people to the board, and I'm sure you're all familiar with sort of the recruitment process for getting people to serve on advisory boards and even on elected positions, trying to not give them sticker shock at the amount of time and effort it's going to cost to serve on the board.
And how
Is-
little they're paid.
It's a big skill. It's probably one of the biggest skills of the job, I'm finding.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Senator Bieowski.
Absolutely, thank you, Scott, for being here and for your clear dedication to public service. I wonder if you've given consideration to the fact that some of the young people who don't have the time to serve on the board might better be able to serve on the board if they could be there remotely and didn't also have to drive, and if that actually, on the one hand, for some may be a burden to being on the board, for others, it might open the door for them.
And tag on to that, that's a great point. One of our most active select board members in Woodstock is a mother of 2 young kids, and remote makes it possible for her.
And I've heard from a member of my community with a disability who remote has made it possible for them to serve.
Absolutely. I think that it was our big hope in doing this. We haven't realized it yet. We have at the school board level, where I think 2 or 3 of the people serving on our school board are only able to participate because they run the meetings with electronic participation. So I think that's a great thing. It's really been a struggle to attract younger people to serve on the municipal government, and I think anything that helps that would be just a terrific thing. So anything that we can do, like there's the carrot, there's the carrot of making it possible for the towns to do this, and then there's the stick of requiring us to hold the hybrid meetings.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay, well, a lot to consider. Scott, thank you so much for your time, and yes, for your service to Hancock. And as you know, we're also doing a bill on flood, government response to flood, which I had tried to get you in on for that. So if you have any suggestions on that, please let me know. You know how to get a hold of me.
I will. If there's one more thing I could address the
Sure,
committee
of course.
about, it was the requirement for retaining recordings of the meetings.
Oh, yeah.
I think the biggest hangup that we've been having, we do in fact try to record all of our meetings, and we store them on a Google Drive, and the minutes of our meetings actually contain a link to the recording. So that's published in the newspaper, it's published on the town's website. I'm a little bit leery of making that a requirement with financial penalties, because we've had a couple of occasions where we either haven't been able to get the recording to work, or the video or audio has been garbled or damaged, or we've had meetings where the not so technically savvy member of the board is there and simply forgets to start the recording.
That's fair. Can I just ask our council, is there a financial penalty for that? As it's written right now? We're just checking with our lawyer to see. Do you need to know?
No, I have a thought on that.
Oh, Senator Watson.
Well, for other kinds of open meeting law violation, there's a possibility of curing it.
Yep.
And so I wonder if there's potential. I don't know how to do that, but could you cure the lack of recording?
Senator Watson is correct that there are opportunities to cure both at the initial complaint level and during the superior court process that might follow. There are penalties, but they are associated solely with intentional and knowing violations of the open meeting law.
So if you forget to do it inadvertently, or the audio is bad because of some technical issue, that's not knowingly, so there wouldn't be a penalty.
If you couldn't get it.
Or you couldn't get it to work, like somebody's.
Well, I think if we can't get it to work, that sort of asks the question of whether we should postpone the meeting and then hold a special meeting, because then we are knowingly, if we can't get it to work and then holding the meeting anyway.
And we do also, the storage, the posting is only for 30 days after the official minutes, so it's not an indefinite type of thing. We did have a lot of discussion about how long we wanted that window to be, so, but you make a good point about the accidental or not, or just not having the tech skills to do it kind of
Yeah.
question,
I-
yeah.
I think time limiting the retention of the meeting recordings is wise, particularly if you're familiar with the way Zoom accounts work. There's only a limited amount of space before you have to start paying for it, and that adds up quickly. So
Yeah.
if the municipality can delete older meetings and save space, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. Senator Yoski.
Yeah, my thought was also sort of pointing to what we heard from, I believe, the Attorney General's office about sort of the process of making an investigation, and in an instance where the media or the sound is garbled, like you made every best effort. It is not, I would not imagine the Attorney General would then be like, no, bad, as opposed to instead saying, well, what can we do so that doesn't happen in the future? Do we need to get one of these grants for better equipment or to do some training as a means of sort of curing the underlying issue?
Yeah, I mean, maybe we could just add an adjective in there about like, I don't know. You Tucker can think about it, we can think about that. All right, we have two other witnesses waiting, so I just wanna make sure we get to them. Scott, thanks so much for your time and your good ideas, and let us know if anything else occurs to you.
Thank you for hearing me.
Our pleasure.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
thank you and your life partner for their service.
Yeah, absolutely.
Full household.
I'm thinking of Jeannie. There, people didn't, I haven't seen the solution. Don't represent Rochester anymore. It's really hard.
Our next witness is Chris Plum from Andover.
Andover.
Chris, are you there?
Yeah, I'm muted.
And this is the traffic. Sorts of stuff.
Chris, I saw you unmute, but now you're muted again. And we can't see you through the video, so are you there?
I'm there.
Hi. Are you able to undo your video so we can see you?
Yeah, so was that,
Excellent. Yes, we can see you. Hi, Chris. Thank you for being here with us today. I think you hopefully have heard the conversation we just had with Scott from Hancock, and I believe you emailed us over the weekend. And do you have a copy, or have you seen the newest draft of the bill?
I have not seen the newest draft. I've
Okay,
not seen- It just came out today, right?
it just came out today. It's posted on our website, and Olivia did you email it to him? I think our committee assistant, Olivia, emailed it to you as well. But do you wanna introduce yourself and share your thoughts about the bill in general and your experience in Andover?
Okay, I'm Chris Plum. I'm the select board chair, the town of Andover. Been that for about 5 years now. Thoughts as a board are due to technical difficulties, it really doesn't work for bigger meetings. As Scott was saying, especially when you get a hot topic where a lot of people want to chime in, it makes it very hard to run a meeting.
It's very hard for which kind of meeting? In person, on Zoom, or hybrid, or all three?
Hybrid.
Hybrid, oh, okay.
Those kind of meetings are difficult enough being in person. But it's hard to, without having a couple of people, especially we're looking at just the computer screen and managing the outside input, it becomes very difficult to control who's talking.
Mm-hmm. How do you run your, currently, are you running your select board meetings in person or via Zoom or hybrid?
We do in-person meetings unless we have like just recently we had to make a decision on how we were going to pay for the payloader that we just bought. Because of the flood and we're short on cash, we decided to lease it. We had to make that decision quickly, so we held a Zoom meeting to decide that one subject. Emergency meeting.
As an emergency meeting, okay,
So it was
And,
do emergency meetings hybrid, I mean, not hybrid, but by Zoom
okay.
occasionally.
And have you ever had a request from somebody in the community that wants to attend the meeting but can't be there in person? If you had such a request, how would you handle that?
We had 2 years ago, or 3 years back, we had a gentleman on the board that traveled a lot and he would Zoom in. So we had hybrid meetings that way. But he had a very difficult time participating because it just didn't work very well.
Okay,
It's hard for him to hear.
so you have held hybrid meetings in the past, that was. You just currently don't have board members that Zoom in, so you're doing all in-person meetings,
Correct.
okay?
So a lot easier. We actually have Okemo Valley TV.
Yeah,
Public access to our meetings. They're
Yeah.
there most of the time, but they're not always there.
Okay, they record your meetings and then post those recordings somewhere?
Yes, on their TV site.
Okay. Senator Bihowski, you have a question?
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, thank you for being here and for your service to Andover. Has anyone on the board had any training on how to moderate a hybrid meeting?
No,
Okay. Do you think that would be a helpful tool if we were to move in this direction to make sure that you got the training you needed?
it would certainly be a help.
So, and this bill does include money for training and equipment, so we certainly aren't hoping. We want to support towns for sure, so thank you.
Senator Clarkson, did you have a question?
Chris, I remember one of your robust Andover meetings was one that I actually attended virtually on short-term rentals.
Yeah.
And that was certainly robust. I can see that a hybrid, some of your short-term rental owners would have been able to appreciate participating remotely is my guess. And certainly in the winter, I know lots of people, this began not only because we were coming to the end of Act 1 in June of 24 and realizing we had to make a provision going forward, but also just there have been so many good examples of being able to meet remotely when we needed to. Did you use any of your ARPA money for any new equipment to enable your remote meetings or hybrid meetings?
I don't believe we did. I don't believe so.
And you're still a 3-person, or have you gone to a 5-person board? Yes.
We've been a 5-person board for years.
Yeah,
Okay.
I thought.
Well, do you have any suggestions for us? I mean, it sounds like you're not keen on us requiring hybrid, but do you have suggestions for other parts of the bill or how we could encourage it if we're not gonna require it, for example?
And I say if you want to encourage it, definitely the grant would help.
The money, right?
Right now, we don't have anything.
The money and I think the money and the training would help.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Finding the time to do the training, though, is another thing.
absolutely, yeah. And any other thoughts?
I think Scott pretty well covered them.
Okay, and for your town meetings, do you do Australian ballot or are you voting from the floor still?
We have a zoning issue that's going to be Australian ballot this year. And the rest of it's from the floor.
Okay, got it, okay. And how, if I may ask, how many people are in Andover? How big is the town?
We're just turned 600, I think.
Yeah.
600, okay, great.
And town meetings around 80 people,
At your town meetings, you get about 80?
80 to 100.
Yeah, your town meetings are a tough time. I never handled it.
Senator White has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Selectman. I really appreciate you coming in. I'm one of your senators along with Senator Clarkson. And I just had a question about who stores your recordings when Okemo Valley does them? Do they keep them and put them on YouTube for you? Where do you hold the recordings of those meetings? Did they own them?
They own 'em. I believe they own them.
Sorry, I didn't quite hear you.
I believe they own them.
They own them, so you don't get them afterwards as a town.
I'm not positive, we just barely got a website within the year. And I'm not sure, I think they're linked on the website, but I think
Okay.
they're stored with Okemo.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, we've had a few discussions about the storage of meetings as recordings, and I had some concerns because it seems in our area, a lot of the cable access folks kind of own those videos. So if you're Zooming, you would have to save the Zoom meeting in addition potentially to the recording.
No, the recording of the meeting could be from, we went through this with Tucker, and as long as the recording. The town has an agreement with the cable access to store the meetings, that they could be stored on Okemo or whatever. And that would count as compliance.
But then I still think the second, yes, you're right, but I think the second, I think the second half of that is. Then they're beholden to keeping it for open meeting law, like they have, I don't know why Okemo would be subject to more things than they are now.
I don't
I don't
think
think
so,
so.
they would only have to keep it for 30 days after the minutes are done anyway.
Patrick's.
Yeah, I mean, we can clarify again with Tucker, but I think that it would be more than what they're doing right now.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, Chris, thank you so much for your time, and if other things, thoughts come, let us know, if you think of anything else that you think we should know. Really appreciate your time today and your service to the town of Andover.
Thank you.
Yeah, take care.
You too.
Okay, one last witness. Eves, are you there?
I'm here.
Awesome. Hi.
Hi there.
Thank you for your patience. And hopefully you've heard the conversation and maybe a little bit of the walkthrough of the bill at this point. If you want to just introduce yourself, and I know you emailed me and others about your concerns with the bill, so tell us your thoughts after introducing yourself.
Sure. I'm Yves Gonnet from the town of Huntington. I'm the zoning administrative officer. So I get to sit in a lot of meetings. I attend all of the select board meetings, the DRB meetings, the planning commission, and I'm also a member of the energy committee for the past 7 years. So I've had a chance to have some experience pre-COVID and post-COVID, I guess if we're there, sort of, mostly. And they're very different groups, but my biggest concern is with two things that I haven't really heard a lot of discussion about here and seem to be largely absent from the bill. And those are implementation and really dealing with participation. And I think it was interesting to hear from Scott that he's got a bunch of tech savvy people in his very small town. Scott and Chris are towns that are quite a bit smaller than Huntington, but by contrast, Huntington just slightly larger than Starksboro and much smaller than, say, Hartford. But, with our 2,000 people, we have about 23% or so that show up and vote at town meeting. And we've definitely experimented with a lot of different hybrids, but it sounds to me that Scott's lucky that there are people that are on their select board with some technical skills and as a result is able to make things work. And I'm not sure that luck good place to place the future of this working. Huntington is also lucky. We have one select board member who is quite technical. And he essentially is the IT staff for the town. And along with another volunteer that does some of the web authoring, there are no bodies to actually do this technical work. To give you for instance, I work in the town offices. I work mostly remote, so I'm in the town offices when I need to be near paper files or meet with people. And until yesterday, I was the young guy at 59. So there's nobody in the office who's technical, or where email works 100% of the time, or there isn't some element of magic to making this type of thing work. On the flip side, since the pandemic and the need to do everything via Zoom, I've seen a huge increase in participation from younger folks on the Energy Committee, in planning, DRB.
You're right.
Folks with kids who can actually do it. Now, they can do a Zoom meeting from home, and sometimes you've got kids in the background during a DRB meeting. But if you ask them to come in, or one of them to come in out of a 3-person board to be in one of the 2 ADA accessible locations that we've got in town that can actually fit some number of people, I'm not sure that participation would be there.
Right.
And I have no idea who would man or make the meetings work. And that's a huge concern, especially since we have pretty good participation, and we do some hybrid meetings today. The select board does have the town administrator who's in the town offices because that's where her work is and her best computer system. So for the night meetings, and almost, all of these are night meetings, she can drive a couple of miles and have the entire select board and really almost all of the public that attends be remote, and that can work. Now, she's retiring. The person that's replacing her, that started 2 days ago, has a toddler in the house. I'm not sure that person who doesn't have the technical skills is going to be able to do the same sort of work. So I completely expect the select board meetings to be entirely remote, with no real possibility of it not being remote without losing participation, potentially, of the IT guy who's the select board member who also has a toddler at home. I just don't see him coming in to sit in the office and make sure that it works for the almost nobody that shows up for the select board meetings.
So what if, so I hear you, I know Huntington has been one of the towns that's been most vocal, that, or at least for me, because I represent Huntington, that wants to have the remote only continue, and just have it just be remote and not have to have an in-person location. What happens if you do have a member of your town who wants to attend a meeting and they can't participate remotely? They have to be there in person for whatever reason. How do you accommodate that person?
So today, the way that that's been accommodated, and I've been in a number of meetings where that's been the case, especially with the Development Review Board. Our town clerk, who is, also in her maybe approaching later 60s, who lives walking distance from the town, and has a much better fiber optic connection at the town than at her house, usually does the clerking for the DRB from the town anyway. So the person with the accessibility issue or the lack of connectivity issue comes into the town offices that she basically owns to be able to participate in that meeting.
So, okay, and so is the only in-person meeting that anybody in Huntington does right now, the town meeting? The annual meeting?
Yeah, pretty much. The library trustees had their first in-person meeting this past week. The first one in years. And actually, that's a question. Are library trustees which category do they fall into?
Are they their own nonprofit or are they a commission or committee of the town?
They're their own nonprofit.
Yeah, they're fine, they're on their own.
If they're a public library board, then they are subject to the open meeting law. And it also depends if they are a library board that has their own budget or if they're not, because as I think I explained in the email, advisory bodies, which the energy committee would be advisory, would not be subject to this, the hybrid requirement. They could still meet fully remotely or fully in person. So under, even with a grant that would provide you with training or equipment, you would still, it's not about that. It's what I'm hearing is it's not necessarily about the tech skills. It's about the members of the bodies themselves being able to attend in person or have anybody attend in person.
And if you provide training, who are you going to train? I mean, there's no other than the volunteer IT person that's currently a select board member and has been for several years, and given the lifespan of select board members is not expected to last forever.
The lifespan of select board members, the actual life or the terms?
The term.
Well, we keep training people. That's part of they get trained as select board people. They can, part of select board people's work going forward is gonna have an element of IT, no matter whether we make this a mandate or not. I mean, it's just inevitable. I mean, even required IT work.
Managing a Zoom meeting is pretty easy. Trying to do it with hybrid, especially if you've got real participation, which we've tried a couple of times with joint select board planning commission meetings around land use regulations, without having the equipment, even with willing people to help technically, is a disaster. Trying to, have microphones passed around a room or laptops, and having the people that are joining be able to hear the audience that's live and also to be heard. And our participation, there's been pretty remarkable. We've had meetings with this last set of land use regulations where the people online and the people that were physically present, were upwards of 60 people for a 2,000 person town for land use regulations is huge.
Yeah, that was a big issue in Huntington. I can tell you, I talked to a lot of people who had strong opinions about land use regulations in Huntington.
We that's true statewide.
Yeah. Did you have a question, Senator Hosky?
Well, I mean, getting 60 people out for a land use conversation through the use of hybrid is sort of case in point to why we want to make this available, is so people can participate. And I think particularly in a moment right now where there is a lot of conversation, certainly in the communities I represent and more globally, about transparency, shutting down an avenue for people to be able to participate seems problematic.
Yeah, the issue that we've had is that the experience for the people that were not physically present at that meeting was so disappointing that it hasn't been repeated and specifically was asked to not be repeated. So the last planning commission meeting that followed up, the regulations was done entirely in person. And just over 30 people showed up for that. And there was no attempt to try and make it work hybrid for remote people that may have participated, that were potentially part of that 60, but didn't because the technology and the space just didn't support it. And the space is a challenge because we've got, a very limited number of places in town that one is able to use at night. The school is the really big place, but the town doesn't really own that anymore. So it's a coordination that takes a much longer time and certainly wouldn't accommodate regular meetings like the select board meetings during the budget season, where the board is meeting, 2 times at least a week for months.
No, I certainly appreciate, I've been to really well-run hybrid meetings and really poorly run hybrid meetings, and it does make a difference, which I very much appreciate, and hopefully the grants for training and equipment is a helpful tool in getting our boards over time to the space where they have the tools and skills to run them well.
Critical.
Senator Clarkson.
No, just tag on that. I think I heard you, Eve, said that the space was an issue. We know that some of these cavernous rooms where people, where our town meetings are, where some of these select board meetings take place, are problematic. There's no question. And I think there's all sorts of stuff that can be done to make that work better. Screenings that we can bring in. There's, as a theater person, that's not difficult, I don't think. What is, I'm just curious, did you use any of your ARPA money on IT equipment for the town?
Good question.
There has been $3,000 allocated for, the next fiscal year to get a base model OWL system and see if we can do something with that.
And has VLCT offered to help you, set up, do they have I know they have some best practices on hybrid meetings and remote meetings, pamphlets out on that, but have they also offered to help advise on what is the best kind of equipment for your situation? And would they send somebody down to come help you do that or set it up? Or choose the equipment?
I don't know that that's happened, but I would be surprised if the town sought it or has used it in the past. Our volunteer IT guy knows a lot, and I'm not sure he would reach out. I mean, it's possible, but I don't have an answer to that.
Well, I'm glad you appropriated that money for that purpose, because I think going into the future, now that you have that land planning meeting to go by, you need to invest in equipment and in training on how to make those work well.
Clearly.
Yeah.
No, it's still a person issue. Who's gonna do it for the select board and the DRB? At night. And regarding forcing a hybrid situation, I've noticed over the number of years that I've been participating in these boards that not surprisingly, I think, the winter attendance drops off substantially. The midsummer, when people are away, drops off substantially.
Yeah.
And I don't know that asking folks to drive, from one end of town to the middle of town is going to increase participation beyond what it is today.
Well, fully remote ends June 30th, sadly.
But we haven't passed this bill yet.
I
There's
know.
still time to make changes to it.
Oh, yeah.
To consider other options. So, Eves, if you have specific language recommendations, like specific to the bill itself, I know you sent your general thoughts in, but if you have, that would be helpful. I mean, I think we are trying really hard to balance the accessibility and feasibility. And accessibility for varying people has varying, you know, some people it's more accessible to be in person, some people it's more accessible to be remote. And now that COVID has sort of made that an option, we want to be able to try to accommodate both. But it's not feasible for all towns and in all situations. So we've tried to put some accommodations in the bill, you know, making the distinction between advisory and legislative bodies. But if you have other suggestions, that you think could help us balance those two goals, because that's really what we're trying to do, that would be great.
Yeah, I do. I would suggest that it be optional. And that, and that the town that knows itself and the people that are going to participate take advantage of increasing participation themselves as much as they can under the circumstances that they're uniquely aware of, given the people that exist at the time.
Okay, Senator Watson, did you have a question?
Well, I have an idea that I just want to float, see what you think about this, Eves. What if it was, I'm not sure how I feel about the suggestion that I'm about to make, but, what if, you know, all remote was an option, all in-person was an option, but by request of anybody in the town, you know, if it's all remote and somebody requested, an in-person, you know, accessibility, that you'd have, like, you would make an effort to do that, I imagine, right? And
Yeah.
similarly, if a meeting was gonna be held all in person and anybody requested that remote access be available, that you try to accommodate that request as well.
Right.
And anyway, I'm wondering out loud if, you know, we can go,
Yeah.
like, just make a request.
Well, one of the things that I think that we've seen, and we got testimony on this, is that there are people who have made that request and the town has refused the request. So I think that if we were to go that route, we would have to require towns to accommodate that.
Whatever.
So
Exactly.
somewhere along the line, there has to be a requirement somewhere, Eves, and so we're, you know, because towns right now. We've had people come to us and testify saying they've made a request for remote access, actually, so that they could attend a meeting remotely, and the town has said no. Or not accommodated the request. And, you know, maybe Huntington would have said yes, but we want people to be treated the same no matter where they live in Vermont, that they have equal access to their democracy no matter where they live. And so that's what we're trying to figure out, and so at some level, we're gonna have to require town, just like we require you to follow the open meeting law. You know, change it, there are gonna have to be some accommodations, some requirements, made of towns, and I hear what you're saying, that you think required, hybrid for select board meetings and similar meetings is too much of a requirement, so where is that line for you?
Well, I think what you suggested in terms of making a method by which to receive requests and having some teeth to make sure that those requests are respected is a good idea. And I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if there was an in-person meeting in a low technology situation where an interested party or even a member of that public body wanted to participate remotely, and they got resistance from the majority of the public body, and that ended up in the situation that you describe, where somebody was denied that request. I think the promotion of the technology is a wonderful idea, and making sure that there's the equipment and the training so that people feel comfortable and it's feasible for them to honor those requests when they do come in. I mean, I think that's what makes it possible for Huntington. It's not that, you know, we're especially nice people. It's just, you know,
Yes, you are.
by comparison to honor those requests when they come in, because of the luck of the people who are doing the work today.
Mhm.
Those people change and become younger people, potentially people with families. I think the dynamic changes and the town needs to have the flexibility to change with it.
Mhm. Senator Bielanski?
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And you know, change is hard. I appreciate that as well. And I think one of the challenges to asking someone to be responsible for making a request is if they need something different, is that can create stigma, that can create we've seen people needing to parade their medical issues publicly because of what was required by the board. Like, it creates an additional burden for people who are already often shut out of these systems.
Right.
And so by putting a requirement that has a year in it, or at this point, 2 years before it actually takes into effect, it allows the time for training and equipment. Because the problem with leaving it up to the people who are already shut out to ask permission to come in is that they don't have the capacity for that. They may not know how to do that. And the people who are sitting that have always been on the inside may not even know who they are. And so I think that as we try to thread this needle, we already put a lot of additional burden for people who can't be in these spaces for whatever reason, whether that's disability or language access. And so it doesn't sit well with me to say, okay, here's one more thing you have to do if you want to participate in our democracy, which is supposed to be your right.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Well, as somebody who doesn't particularly like to drive at night,
Yeah.
I am pretty sure that personally, if somebody were to say, I'm the guy that needs to sit in the meeting because I'm the DRB staffer that's got to go into the offices to be able to make sure that there's a place for somebody to come and be, which rarely happens, I'm fairly sure my personal participation would drop off.
Yeah. I've heard that.
And this is something I haven't heard yet, but maybe you've got some provision for it, though I haven't read it. What happens if the technology person who you're counting on to make that hybrid meeting work isn't available?
Mhm.
And you can only then do hybrid? What happens to that meeting?
Or only remote or something.
Yeah, so I mean, I think there are two things that might apply to that situation is we've just had this sort of conversation about what happens if you forget to hit the record button. Is that willful violation, or is that just human error that would not be enforced in terms of a violation of the open meeting law? And I think that if your tech person is not available, the other is that you've done your best, you tried, but you couldn't make it work. But then the other option is that boards, we have a possibility of a local incident,
Right.
which, could mean a whole variety of things. We sort of imagined, a snowstorm that prevents people from going out. If that's the case, you can meet fully remotely. Or if there's a power outage, maybe you're gonna have to meet fully in person because nobody can actually get online because there's no power and no internet. And in both cases, you would just make the select board chair or the chair of the body would make the determination. There's a local incident that requires us to meet only in person or only in hybrid. So presumably, a local incident could be the tech person is not able to run the hybrid meeting and therefore we can only meet in person or we could only meet remotely. We can talk to our attorney about that to see if he thinks that would work, but I think that that's what we were trying to get at, that there are these local things that only the town knows about. They're not a full-blown catastrophic flood throughout the entire state, but maybe a power outage in Huntington or a public safety issue in a school or something like that.
Or a sick kid?
Yeah.
I'm not sure dad's leaving to run down to the town offices to make something work if there's a sick kid at home. It depends.
Yeah, I think I think we could expand the local incident thing. I also think we don't want it abused. So I also think that's a balance. There can always be a sick kid. There can always be a reason we have to, oh, I'm so sorry, we have to be remote again.
Yeah.
I think
Well, there's,
our objective is to really try and do that balance. I'll just repeat Ruth's statement, is balancing accessibility, participation, and feasibility. And we don't want to make a bar that's so high, it's not easy to reach, but we're gonna try to make it easy for people to reach. And we are having a very successful hybrid meeting right now. The only challenge we face is that I can't look at you on the screen because I'm not looking at you in person here. So I have to look at you here to actually, for you to see me. That's not such a big challenge. But we have been lucky enough to have great equipment here at the State House. And now all our meetings are hybrid. I mean, and it has enabled countless hours of driving saved by witnesses. So much less carbon polluted into our atmosphere, and we are so pleased that these hybrid meetings are as successful as they are.
and
And I think
we have staff and we have a budget for the tech equipment, so we realize that, and not every town does. And it's a different situation, it's not quite an apples to apples.
It's not apples to apples, but we're trying to help. We know how successful it can be, and we're trying to enable that for our towns. And as we come out of COVID, take the best of COVID and kind of marry it to the best of being in person, which we also all find sort of unparalleled, that some of the interactions in person that are really rich.
Oh, and I agree with that. And I want to make sure not to forget to thank you all for your work on this. It's a tough subject. And I'm sure you'll find a solution.
I hope so. We still have a lot to think about, clearly. But Yves, thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. And thanks for your service to the town of Huntington.
Yeah, and Chris, good to see you all the way in Andover. Huntington, Andover. Look, we had these people from all these remote.
Yes. Have a good afternoon, you guys, or good evening at this point.